All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today we're going deep, really deep into the world of platelets and blood clotting.
Oh, yeah, this is gonna be good.
And, I was going over all the stuff you guys sent in articles, research notes, even a couple of textbook chapters, it seems like.
Wow, hardcore fans this week.
For real. And let me tell you, it gets pretty complex.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, most folks think blood clot, and it's like, okay, simple, my blood turns solid. But there's so much more to it, right?
Right. It's intricate. It's wild. And actually, it's way cooler than I think any of us would expect. Like, it's literally a life-saving process that's happening inside of us all the time. Every little paper cut, every scrape, every time you bump your knee, these tiny little heroes come to the rescue.
Tiny heroes is a great way to put it.
And those tiny heroes, of course, are the platelets. But something I was reading earlier kind of threw me for a loop. Apparently, platelets aren't actually cells.
Now, they're not your typical cells, that's for sure. So picture this. You've got this big mama cell called a megakaryocyte hanging out in your bone marrow.
Big mama cell. I love it.
And this megakaryocyte, it basically explodes, but in a good way.
Explodes in a good way. You got to explain that one.
Basically, it shatters into thousands, and I mean thousands, of tiny little pieces. And those pieces, those are your platelets. Ready to roll, ready to clot.
Hold on. Thousands from just one megakaryocyte.
Thousands, yep. And they're pretty much on a kamikaze mission because without a nucleus, they've only got about 10 days to live. So your body is constantly churning out new ones. A never-ending supply.
That is insane. So we've got these tiny little, not quite cells, constantly being produced and just cruising around in our blood.
Exactly. Just waiting for their moment to shine.
So, okay, what happens for that moment comes? Like, say you do get a cut. How do these little platelets know where to go and what to do?
All right, so this is where the real magic happens. And it's called hemostasis, which is just a fancy word for the process of stopping bleeding. And this process, it's basically a 3-act play, perfectly choreographed.
Okay, drama. I'm here for it. Give me Act 1.
Act 1, vascular spasm. So imagine you nick yourself. First thing that happens is the smooth muscle in your blood vessels around the injury, they freak out a little and they contract.
Kind of like a reflex.
Exactly, like when the doctor taps a knee and your leg kicks out. Same idea. But here, that contraction, that spasm, it's like a temporary clamp on the blood flow. Slow things down.
Hold up. Damage detected. Got to slow the flow.
Right. But that's not all. At the same time, the cells lining those blood vessels, the endothelial cells, they start sending out chemical signals. Think of it like an SOS beacon.
Mayday. Mayday. We need backup.
Perfect.
So the scene is set, right? We've got our temporary clamp. The SOS is going out. What happens next? What's Act 2?
Act 2, enter the platelets. Now remember, they've been just chilling in the blood, waiting for this moment. And when they sense those SOS signals, they're like, game on, and they rush to the injury site.
Like little bloodhounds sniffing out the truck.
Exactly. Now, the exposed collagen at the injury site, it's like a welcome mat for platelets. They see that and they just stick. And this is called adhesion.
So they're literally sticky?
Oh, yeah, they're like the tiny little Velcro patches.
I would not have guessed that. So they're stuck, but what then? Just hang out there.
Oh, no. Things get even more interesting. Once those platelets are stuck, they start releasing even more chemicals, like ADP. Think of it as them amplifying the SOS signal. Hey, guys, it's really bad down here. We need reinforcements.
So they're calling it even more platelets.
Exactly. And this is called the release reaction or degranulation, if you want to get technical.
Degradation. Got it.
And that leads us to the final step of Act 2, aggregation. More and more platelets come rushing in, sticking to each other, to the collagen, building this big old platelet plug.
So it's like this massive pileup of tiny little sticky platelets.
Exactly. A microscopic traffic jam, but this time it's a good thing. And it's a positive feedback loop, which means the more platelets that arrive, the more they attract even more platelets.
Hold on, positive feedback. Isn't that usually like a bad thing? Runaway reactions and all that?
You're right, it can be, but here it's what we need. It's fast, it's efficient, and it stops the bleeding quickly.
Okay, I see the logic. But doesn't this mean we just keep getting bigger and bigger clots? How do we stop this platelet party?
Ah, excellent question. And that brings us to the grand finale, Act 3, coagulation.
Okay, hit me with Act 3. This is where the real clotting happens, right?
Exactly. This is where we go from a temporary fix to a solid, stable clot. And this is where things get really, really complex.
Uh-oh. Complex. But we can handle it, right?
We can handle it. Basically, imagine it like a relay race, a cascade of reactions. One protein activates another, which activates another, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so like a chain reaction.
Yeah, exactly. And the key player here is this protein called prothrombin activator. It's like the starting pistol. And ultimately, all these reactions lead to the conversion of a protein called fibrinogen into fibrin. You with me so far?
Starting pistol, prothrombin activator, fibrinogen to fibrin. Got it. But what do those even do?
Well, think of fibrinogen as like a bunch of loose threads floating around in your blood.
Okay, loose threads. I can picture that.
But when it's converted to fibrin, those threads become sticky and they start to link together, forming a mesh.
Uh-huh. Okay. And that mesh is what makes the actual clot.
Exactly. That fibrin mesh, it traps red blood cells, it reinforces the platelet plug, and it basically creates the solid clot that we all know and love, or at least appreciate.
A net made of sticky threads capturing those red blood cells. I could see it.
Pretty neat, huh? But there's even more. Once that clot is formed, the platelets inside, they don't just sit there, they contract. And this pulls the edges of the wound closer together.
So the clot is like shrinking, bringing everything back together.
Exactly. It's called clot retraction. And then to make sure everything heals up nicely, the platelets release something called platelet-derived growth factor, or PGGF. And PDGF, it's like fertilizer for your cells. It stimulates new tissue growth.
Okay, team, we've plugged the hole. Let's rebuild.
Time for some home improvement. And finally, once the wound is all healed up, the body's like, all right, clot, you did your job. Time to go.
And how does the clot go? Does it just fall off?
Nope. It gets broken down, dissolved by an enzyme called plasmin. It's like the body's own cleanup crew, making sure everything is back to normal, no trace left behind.
Man, our bodies are amazing. Like, so much is going on that we never even think about.
Right, and it all works together so perfectly. Well, almost perfectly.
Oh, right. You mentioned earlier that things could go wrong. What happens when this whole intricate system, glitches?
Yeah, so that's when we run into clotting disorders and bleeding disorders. Two sides of the same coin, really.
So on one hand, too much clotting, and on the other, not enough.
You got it. So too much clotting, that's where we get things like thrombus and embolus.
Now, I remember those words from the research, but refresh my memory. What's the difference again?
All right, so a thrombus is like a clot that forms where it's not supposed to. It just kind of hangs out blocking blood flow. And that can be bad news, especially if it's in your heart or brain.
Yeah, not good. And embolus.
Embolus is like a thrombus that decided to go on an adventure. It breaks off and starts traveling through your bloodstream. And wherever it ends up, well, that's where the trouble starts. Could be a stroke, a pulmonary embolism. Depends where it lands.
So basically clots. Stay put, and you're okay. Start wandering, and things can get scary.
Pretty much. And then on the flip side, we've got the bleeding disorders, not enough clotting. And one of the most well-known ones is hemophilia.
Hemophilia, yeah, I've heard of that one.
So hemophilia, it's a genetic disorder, meaning it's passed down through families. And basically, folks with hemophilia are missing certain clotting factors, those proteins in the relay race we talked about. So their blood just doesn't clot properly.
So even a small cut could be a big problem.
Yeah, it can be really tough. Even a minor injury can cause prolonged bleeding.
Wow. I mean, we started talking about paper cuts, but this is serious stuff.
It is, and it really highlights just how vital this whole clotting process is. It's a balancing act, and our bodies do an incredible job keeping it all in check.
Absolutely incredible. I got to say, when we started this deep dive, I thought, okay, blood clotting, pretty straightforward. But this journey into the microscopic world inside of us, it's blown my mind.
Right. It's like you don't realize just how much is going on in there every second of every day. All these tiny players, these chemicals, these reactions, just working tirelessly to keep us going.
It's really humbling, honestly.
It is, and it makes you wonder, what other secrets are hidden in these tiny processes? We've talked about how our bodies stop bleeding, but what about how researchers are using this knowledge to, say, develop new bio-inspired materials for wound healing, or create even better treatments for these clotting and bleeding disorders? There's so much more to explore.
That is a fantastic point. I mean, what other microscopic miracles are we taking for granted? It's definitely something to ponder. So next time you get a little cut, don't just slap on a Band-Aid and forget about it. Take a second, think about those platelets, those tiny little heroes working their magic.
Yeah, give them a little mental high five. They deserve it.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe some of you listening will be the ones to unlock the next big discovery in the world of blood and clotting. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a blast.
Until next time, 22 time.